everyone. Welcome to Speakers Bank Podcast, Disability Edition. I'm Mary from JTI, working for Speakers Bank. And today's special new guest would be introduced by Morian, which is my favorite all time co host, that she will share her story about her childhood memories. Right, Morian?
Yes, thank you, Mary, for today's. Welcome everyone to today's podcast again. My name is Marion. I'm one of the JTI and Speakers Bank member. Today we receive again a special guest that we will discuss. We'll have a conversation and learn from her, hear her story, and I hope this story inspires a lot of people that will be watching this video. So, without wasting your time, I will invite our special guest inside. Good morning, Lauren. How are you today?
Hi, Maureen. Hi, Mary. I'm well, thank you, and thanks so much for having me.
Thank you. Today's podcast will be more about growing up from your earliest memories until present day. So, please, would you tell us about your early childhood memories?
Yeah, sure. So, I was born in Adelaide in South Australia, and I was born 14 weeks early, so I was a premature baby.
Okay.
And fun fact is that my dad's wedding ring would fit up my arm because I was so tiny. And we do have this to prove it somewhere, I believe. So that's a bit of a fun fact. And when my parents realised that I would be totally blind as a result of that premature birth, they decided that they wanted to give me every opportunity possible to participate in education and just in the community more broadly, in the same way that my sighted peers would. And so, of course, I don't remember anything about this at all, but remember probably from when I was about 3 years old, maybe. That's for most people that their earliest memories, 2 or 3. And by this stage, we had moved back to Victoria. We're from Victoria originally. And we came back because Mum and Dad wanted me to be educated in a mainstream school. And at that time, this was in the mid-80s in South Australia, most, if not all, blind students went to special school or school for the blind in Adelaide, and my parents didn't want me to do that. So we came back to Victoria partly to be closer to family, but also because of the education factor. Going to be more opportunities for me to participate in mainstream school with specialist support. And so I don't really remember my early childhood. I don't think that it was any different to other kids. I used to play in the backyard, have my friends over, just do the kind of normal things that kids did. Sometimes I'll have to do things a little bit differently. I perhaps ran into things a bit more than some kids, perhaps not always concentrating on what I was doing or just not being quite spatially aware of what was around me. But that was how I learned to navigate my environment. And so I don't think I was wrapped up in cotton and wool in any way. I was just expected to do regular kid stuff, and as I got older, I was expected to do chores and not try and play the blind card, get away with anything.
Okay. I think we're just having a bit of a problem with your connection. Your voice is not really coming out a bit clean, so we are not hearing your voice a bit. I don't know if that's maybe due to the connection around, but anyway. So
I did actually, it did just flash up a message saying that my connection isn't stable, and I'm not sure how to fix it.
Yes. So we would like to know what type of equipment, what type of heads do you use that finds that makes your life a better quality of life, you know?
Yeah, so when I'm traveling, I use a white cane. I'm not a person, and that's a personal choice thing, and that's perfectly okay. Everyone needs a mix of what works for them. So a long white cane is my preferred method of travel, and then along that, I use a little bit of echolocation, which is where sounds will bounce off things around you and reflect back. And so you can use your hearing to get a sense of the acoustics and the kind of environment that you're in. Some people will use echolocation in the form of a kind of tongue click, so they might make that kind of noise.
Okay.
Some people just use the tap of their canes or the sort of acoustic cues in their environments. And so that's what I would do primarily, is use the tap of my cane to get a sense of what's around. Or use the tongue clicks occasionally, but the cane is, again, how I navigate in a lot of ways. And then more recently, thanks to technology, I also use GPS apps to help me, whether that's in a taxi and looking at directions if the driver happens to be unsure, or just keeping an eye on where we are. Maybe it might be that I'm walking along a street and I'm looking for a particular shop or building, and I will use GPS on my phone to help me to locate those, in addition to just the old-fashioned asking people for help occasionally if I'm sure as well.
Okay, that's very nice. And how was your experience? Um Sorry, just give me a second.
Mhm.
How was your experience with early schooling? Did you attend a special school, or I know you mentioned about where you in Adelaide, you know, some of the students or the kids were attending special school when you moved here, or wherever else you were living in Australia. How was your experience
Mm.
with early schooling? Did you attend a special school, or were you able to attend just a normal school, a standard school?
So I attended mainstream school all the way through. My parents didn't really want me to attend special school. There was a school for the blind, which at the time was the Royal Victorian Institute for the Blind, or RVIB school. But that would have meant being away from home and being billeted with a family to attend that school. And so they decided to keep me in mainstream school right through. And integration was really encouraged then as well for blind students where possible. So I had assistance from an integration aide, as well as what we call a visiting teacher. In some states, they're called itinerant teachers
Okay.
from the RVIB. But I would also go to the RVIB for different programs that they ran for kids in mainstream schools. So it gave us a chance to come together to meet other students who were blind, and some of the teachers at the RVIB were blind as well. So it meant that we were meeting adults who were just living in the community, and they were, I guess, mentors as well as teachers, because it gave me a sense of the kind of things that I would be able to do as I grew older. It also gave me a chance to meet other students who were blind, as I said. So that was great because we could share in similar experiences. Not everybody had a great time in mainstream school. Um, my time was mixed, I think. So early primary school, I had a really solid group of friends, and then probably towards the end of primary school, that started to change, and I got the sense that people didn't really want to hang out with me anymore because I was blind, and that kind of continued into high school as well. So being able to meet other students who are blind was really helpful, just to provide some good social networks. as
Yes.
well as learning skills, blindness specific skills like orientation and mobility, learning how to start to cook independently, to learn about maths and braille music, blind sports, things that were probably a little bit harder to teach
Okay.
in mainstream environments. So, yeah, I
Yeah.
guess I had a mixed school experience growing up. Was certainly glad to finish high school, definitely. Couldn't wait to get out into the world. I was very, very excited on the day of my final year 12 and haven't looked back since, really.
Great experience, as you explained how you went through all these challenges and going to studies and learning. Being in this country, Australia, where they provide a lot of equipment, they provide a lot of ways of how to teach people, either you, whatever disability you have, it's quite a blessing, and it's a result to where everyone here in Australia, whether you have disability or not, you can still do what you want to do, and it's a great thing. And did you think that there was enough government funding for people who have disability similar to yourself? And if not, where do you think that could be improved, please?
Yeah, do you mean in the present day, or are you talking about sort
Yeah,
of the
in a
education?
time, and to the present time now, if you
Yeah.
compare. Mm,
So I think growing up, I went to a government-funded primary school, so just public school,
yes.
and had a lot of resources then. But the secondary school that I went to was a private school, and so obviously there's not as much government funding there, and it was harder to get the resources that I needed. So getting books provided in Braille, getting specialist support from visiting teachers. There was some funding, but not as much as what I would have had in a public school. But the reason that my parents chose the school that I went to was because they were very supportive of taking on students with disabilities, whereas some of the other schools that we had some of the other schools we had visited were visibly quite anxious about having a blind student coming on board.
Yes.
And so, I think there is that divide, and, that's some of the difficulties that education presents between
Yes.
private and public. I think now we have the National Disability Insurance Scheme, which I was a latecomer to. I was very resistant to signing up as a participant,
Okay.
but
Okay.
finally did at the end of last year. And it has made a difference in a lot of ways, being able to just access some more supports that I need, particularly around technology. Prior to being on the NDIS, if I wanted some technology for personal use, I would generally have to just find money for that unless I could find some sort of funding through charity and that kind of thing, which isn't ideal either. Or when I was employed, I was able to get funding through job access to get equipment. So the NDIS has created a little bit more of an equal playing field, although it does depend on the plan that you get. And in some ways, I think it is still a bit like a lottery in terms of the funding that you receive. So there's still some gaps, and there's still a lot of work that we need to do to make the NDIS system fairer than what it is.
Okay.
But we're getting there. It's slow progress, but I
Yeah.
think it has improved since I was younger, definitely.
He hasn't improved much, isn't it?
No, it's small steps.
Small steps, yeah.
Yeah,
It's a
yeah.
little bit better, let's say, from how it was before, isn't it? Because if you look
Yeah,
at it, things change every day, and things much improve from where things become a bit much easier than where it was before. For example,
yeah.
how.
And I would
Yeah.
say certainly in
Yeah.
this current time as we're recording, we're in the middle of the pandemic of COVID, and
Mm.
I have made extensive use of my NDIS funding, and I can't speak on behalf of other people with disabilities, but personally,
Okay.
It's been so helpful having access to a support worker. Normally, I would be quite happy to do my groceries independently and to be out in the community, but with the mask wearing in place, which does make spatial awareness a little bit more tricky,
Okay.
and with social distancing and with the markers in shops that aren't tactile, there's a lot of extra things to navigate now, and having some support for that has been super helpful. And I think that if I wasn't on the NDIS in the current situation that we're in, I would have managed, but I think it probably would have been a lot more stressful.
Okay. Let's talk about technology. How much do you think technology has changed from earliest recognition to current days? If
Yeah, that's a great question, and it's improved in leaps and bounds and is improving all the time. I kind of feel like now, I'm in my mid-30s. Every now and then there's a new piece of tech that comes out, and I feel
Okay.
like my grandparents, and I say things like, oh, technology these days. But when I was a kid, I did a lot of my schoolwork on what's called a Perkins Brailler. So it was an old Braille typewriter. You would stick special paper in it and you could write in Braille. And a lot of my work was produced that way. And we had tactile maps, and we had, so I'm trying to think what else. I did have a laptop that had speech, but it was very rudimentary in what it could do. But that's how I learned to type. So that speech technology was definitely there. And by the time I started high school, speech technology on Windows computers was just starting to improve a
Yes.
lot. And that gave me access to the internet and email, which I'd not had before. Then we started
Okay.
to see the invention of electronic braille displays. So
Okay.
by the time I was probably 16, I was able to use we had something called a braille light back then, and it was like a Perkins brailler, but you didn't put paper in it. It had a screen underneath the keys with electronic pins that would form the shape of braille dots, and I could just carry that around instead of this big, clunky, heavy typewriter kind of
Okay.
contraption. And so that just made things so much more efficient. I was able to get work from teachers on a floppy disk and read it with speech. I didn't always have to wait to have it brailled unless it was something that I needed in braille specifically. So things like music and some of my psychology work needed to be brailled because there were more complex symbols and complex aspects that needed to be represented. But for all the humanities subjects like literature and history and German, I was able to use my laptop and braille display for those, and that has just improved so much since then. I remember in my postgraduate studies, compared to my undergrad even, being able to find textbooks that I needed for my studies on Kindle and being able to read them on my phone and using a braille display again, sort of a combination of the two. Whereas
Yes.
in my undergrad degree, we still had to send things either to the alternative formats department at uni or to Vision Australia or another transcription service like that to be produced. And so sometimes there could be a bit of a lag in getting those things back so that I could study. But it's become so much more instantaneous now. So, and then, of course, we have smart speakers, and
Yeah.
there's just so many things. And the iPhone has been a real game changer as well, because
Yeah.
it's a mainstream piece of technology that everybody can use. It's been
Yes.
made accessible out of the box. We don't have to buy expensive software to install onto those devices in addition, whereas with the early mobile phones, you
Yes.
did have to put special software on it could be quite costly. But now we just can use an iPhone or any Apple product straight from the Apple Store. And so that, I think that's really critical. And I'd love to see more mainstream companies developing products with inbuilt accessibility rather than having to try and retrofit something later on.
Yes, I definitely agree with that because technology has changed way so much and has made things way more easier. Because nowadays, even I do talk to my family back home sometimes. I talk to them via video, and then I can see what they're doing in village, and they see what I'm doing here. And it's just amazing, it's never happened before. I remember back in the days where to talk to someone very far, you have to go in some sort of center where they will connect you with the person who also have to go to the center over there in the city, and then they will connect you in some type of phones and where you have to talk and then stop and then someone have to talk there too. Kind of things like that. But nowadays, it's just easier. It's like just a phone call. Anytime you want to, you just grab your phone and do it, and you don't have to wait until the person have to speak and then you have to speak on your turn. But it's great things, and it's make things way much easier. So is your home set up with some of wonderful equipment of technology as in things like Google or similar product, and how much does that help to you?
I do have a Google Home and I have an Alexa. Oh, good. I said that and I thought I was going to set her off, but she didn't make a noise. So I have both of those products, but I probably don't utilize them in as extensively as I could, insofar as I don't have my lights hooked up to them or any of my appliances. I just do the old-fashioned thing. I mean, I don't really need to use the lights because I can cook in the dark and just do most things in the dark, really. But if I do need to have lights on for whatever reason, I will just do the old-fashioned thing and walk over to the light switch and turn it on rather than asking my smart speaker to switch them on. But it certainly would be helpful. I think if my partner is also blind and he has his heating system isn't overly accessible for people who are blind, and so he has been able to connect it with his smart speakers, and so he can just ask his Google to turn the heater on. So I certainly can see where it has those advantages, but I personally haven't found that I've needed them. But I will ask it for traffic reports, which I can also do on my phone, but sometimes it's a little bit more straightforward with a smart speaker. I will sometimes look up recipes, the weather, and again, these are all things we could do before we had smart speakers. What I do use it for a lot is streaming radio. I will connect my phone to it via Bluetooth so I can play my music through it. But they're not really anything, I don't think they're super exciting things, and they're kind of things that most people would do. So I probably haven't taken advantage of these sort of, what do they call it? The appliance connections and the Internet of Things kind of options. But I certainly know that that's there if I do want it down the track.
Yeah, it's very nice where you have so much equipment where it helps you move, do things, even cook, which is so amazing. It's so impressed about it because I've heard these kind of things, and where I've been, where I was born, there is less equipment, less things to help people who need it. But in this country, they do everything. It's very nice. So, Fandi, what advice would you give to young people with disability as they make their way into the world of adulting?
Yeah, adulting. It is such a buzz kind of word, isn't it? But it is definitely something that we need to think about. And, when I was starting my adulting journey, it was really helpful having friends to talk to who were in similar positions. So meeting other
Yes.
people with disabilities to talk to about their experiences and just to get tips. Like when I first moved into a share house,
Okay.
I had some friends of mine who were blind, who were a little bit older than me, who had raised kids and who had gone through kind of all of the things that I was just beginning. So if I was cooking something, and this was like pre-smart speaker, I wasn't quite sure, I would call my friend and I'd say, I'm making this cake and I'm not really quite sure what it is supposed to happen. And she'd say, well, the mixture should feel like this and it might even sound like this when you take it out of the oven. Listen for what it's doing as well. So things like that were really helpful. Having those kind of friendship and social network supports.
Yes.
Some of the things that I found frustrating were things like towards the end of high school and even when I went to uni, I would come across teachers who would say things like, oh, I worked with a blind student a number of years ago and they did this, so you should do that too. Or how come you don't do the same thing that this student did? So I was being compared to other students who are blind, and if I could go and talk to my younger self, I would probably give the advice of advocating a little bit more
And
and
do you think
saying, hey, I'm not
was it a good thing? Was it a good thing to be compared, or did you like it, or it was a bit kind of
no,
triggered you?
I didn't really like it. It sort of
Okay.
created these expectations that I had to fit into
Yes.
a
Yes.
particular kind of box.
Yes.
But I don't think wasn't able to articulate that well at the time, or I didn't feel, I just wanted to kind of keep the peace and go along with things.
Yes.
And so I didn't speak up perhaps as much as I should have.
Yes.
And sometimes as I've said, having people in my friendship and social networks who are blind has been really helpful, but they were
Yeah.
the friendships that I chose and that formed naturally rather than having someone say, oh, you should be like this person. So I
Yes.
would say if that's happening, please don't go along with
Yes.
that. You don't have
Yes.
to. You need to be your own person and learn what is going to work for you and what doesn't work for you. I would also say if you're accessing supports, whether that's note takers at university or just support workers, you are working as a team, so you don't want to have someone come along and tell you how you should do things or do things for you. You need to have people who do things with you and alongside you, and you need to be the one to call the shots about how that is going to work rather than have people coming and making a whole lot of assumptions about what you need or don't need.
Yeah. Thank you very much, Lauren, for sharing this inspiring story to us as we are receiving it with both hands, and as is also inspiring us to share this story to others. Thank you again for coming today, and I hope we'll continue again with more series next time to talk about your story. It's always good to learn. And thanks to everyone who's watching, who will be watching these videos. And as you can follow us on Speakers Bank, where you can watch Lauren's video at all the time with the series that we're going to do. So thanks again. And I'll hand this to Mary. Thanks.
Thank you so much, Mario. Well done. Thank you. And like what Marian has said, it really inspires me, Lauren, which I am greatly honored that you were our guest speaker today. Thank you for your time.
Thanks for having me.
Thank you. And what touches me personally is when you shared about your story about the 14 weeks early when you were born out in this world. That's inspiring. It just shows how your survival and good strength trait you have and your adulting journey. It's really inspiring, Lauren. So that was so personal and amazing. So this inspirational story that you shared to us today, hopefully this will be one of the many podcasts as you can inspire all of these who are watching this. So for everyone, You have just watched Lauren's story. If you have any questions, comments, and suggestions, please give us a call 03-931-40988 and visit the website speakersbank.org.au. Don't forget to like and subscribe Speakers Bank YouTube channel and our Facebook page. Thanks, everyone. Thanks, Lauren and Marian. See you again next
Thank
time.
you.
You're welcome.
See you. See you.